waiting for the UN General Assembly to recognize the day. Many countries are taking matters into their own hands and have commemorated it because more than any other place on earth, identity matters in Africa. Take a look at the following 1-minute video, which captures only a glimpse of what took place. Operator, please launch the video. Congratulations. How do you feel?
Over the moon, actually. Very excited.
In the chat, you will find the link to ID Day page, which has more images and videos from what took place on that extraordinary day. When you see such footage, you realize this is very real. Our grassroots movement is building awareness and accelerating the march towards responsible identity for all in Africa. You cannot make such footage up. The intensity, the breadth, and the initiatives of the events in Africa were exciting to see. But when we look at the rest of the world, we realize there is still a lot of work for us to do to explain the significance of this day to the world outside Africa. No developed country observed or officially noticed it, even though some mainstream international media has begun picking up on our message of identity being an existentialist right. It is clear that the advocacy for identity remains entrenched within the development agenda. This is to be expected given the priorities and needs of developing countries. And it is also the consequence of our past singular focus on ID for D. But now, as identity goes digital and its use permeates across the globe, accelerated by the recovery in the COVID aftermath, we have an opportunity to broaden our narrative, to highlight the fact that this existentialist right should not be taken for granted by people in developed countries. Identity is precious, but it's also vulnerable. It can be usurped or abused in many ways. This is especially true in countries where the rush towards the digitization of the human experience and the resulting abundance of aggregated data have created risks to privacy and individual liberties. We believe our advocacy for the protection of identity and privacy are as important as our drive for identity for all. The convergence of the two missions should sustain us forward, and September 16 as International Identity Day is a perfect tool for broadening our reach globally. We're painfully aware that in order to succeed in getting September 16 recognized as World ID Day at the UN, we will need to mobilize the developed nations as well. While September 16 this year is still fresh on our minds, it behooves us to begin our outreach worldwide, keeping the duality of our stated mission in mind. Advocate identity for all for those who do not have it, and advocate the protection of it for those who do. This makes our campaign richer, albeit more challenging, but it also gives us universal appeal. We hope that we can call on our worldwide network of partners to join us. If you believe you are in a position to influence your country's leadership in this regard, please reach out to us. Our new expanded Friends of the Coalition category should allow us to welcome anyone who thinks will be able to contribute to the objective of establishing September 16 as World Identity Day. Please check out the link in the chat for more information. Before we move on, we're curious to find out how you observed the day. So we have a quick yes/no poll for you. Operator, please launch the poll. Okay, so the first question, this is a two-question poll. Did you see anything about Identity Day on September 16? So if you've seen it on social media, if you've seen it through emails that were sent to you, if you've seen it on radio, on television, on the street, anything. Please vote honestly, because we just want to know to what extent there has been awareness. Okay. Operator, I think we can end the poll. We can end this one. So we're talking about 70% said yes, we've seen it. 30% said no, we have not seen it. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. Ask the second question, please. Now we're saying it's not seen it. Did you do something to celebrate ID Day? Meaning, have you sent somebody a message saying happy Identity Day, or you tweeted or did something? It's okay if you haven't. Just we want to be aware so we can mobilize next year better. Okay. Okay. Operator, you can end the poll. So basically 60% roughly said, no, I didn't do anything for Identity Day, and 40% said yes. So no problem. I think next year we have opportunity to all participate and continue this sensitization campaign. Okay, back to today's episode. The episode will consist of two segments as advertised. Let's put up the two segments. The first will be a new policy segment we call To the Point. Today, I will talk to Liv Nordhaug, who is the co-lead of the Digital Public Goods Alliance and a project manager at the Norwegian Development Agency, NORAD. We will discuss strategic decisions for building government digital platforms that achieve sovereignty and maintain fitness for purpose throughout the lifetime of national projects. This will be a 15-20-minute segment, depending on your questions and community voices. We will then start our second segment, which consists of two parts. Part one will be South Africa report, where we have with us Luvhiwani Makode, the DG of Home Affairs South Africa. And in part two, we'll have the Kenya report with Ruben Kimoto, the Director of National Registration Bureau, and Janet Musheru, the Director of Civil Registration from Kenya. These promise to be very informative sessions that show how attention to homegrown solutions and local capacity building can lead to sovereignty and empowerment. I know many of you are looking forward to hearing from these two countries, as they have been making significant progress but have not been seen on the speaker circuit. So we are pleased to give you the opportunity to hear from them first, here on today's episode. Before we start, I have a few quick housekeeping items to share. First, I'd like to thank our development partners, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for their support of our livecasts. Their presence with us is keeping this community strong and well-informed. Also, I'd like to unveil the lineup for the next livecast, which is on October 13. We will have a To the Point segment with Tariq Malik, who has recently rejoined Pakistan's NADRA, the National Database and Registration Authority, as its new chairman, and has been moving his country's identity ecosystem into the next generation and into the future. Lots of useful lessons and insights to share. We will also hear from the Morocco and Lesotho reports, two countries who have been innovating in building their national population registers as basis for service delivery, including, in the case of Morocco, a large-scale deployment of the open source platform MOSIP. So we hope you will mark your calendar and will join us for this must-see livecast. The link to register for this event has just been released in the chat. Also this morning, we opened up a call for participation to a very special thematic livecast we are planning to hold on November 17. The topic is the dark side of identity, mitigating the risks. This is really the opportunity for us to explore in which ways identity systems could be harmful if not implemented correctly. We will examine themes such as entrenchment of exclusion, discrimination, gender and racial bias, and invasion of privacy and data exploitation. We believe the full spectrum of such dangers can be mitigated, and the benefits of identity systems for individual empowerment outweigh the risks when formulated within a well-defined legal frameworks and protection guardrails. If you believe you can contribute to this important discussion, We invite you to submit an expression of interest to join the panel as soon as possible. The link is in the chat. This will be a panel of experts, practitioners, and civil society drawn from the global community of stakeholders. So be there. Finally, we're less than 24 hours away from the deadline, closing deadline, for voting for this year's Good Idea Awards. As I had mentioned last time, ID for Africa was nominated under the inclusion category. If you find us deserving, please vote for us. This is your last chance to show the world that your movement is making a difference in the fight for inclusion. If you have voted, we thank you. If you have not, here's the link in the chat, and you can vote right now. Thank you to everyone. While you're voting, I'd like to remind you that you can participate in today's discussion through several ways. You can do it via the chat, so meet your colleagues and network. You can also participate, as you've done, through the live polling, but also the question and answer. If you want to ask questions, please put them into the Q&A section. And then, of course, community voices, which I highly encourage you to participate. We have several opportunities today to bring you on the stage. Before we move on, I'd like to welcome the new members of our community and ask you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, ID for Africa Media. And if you watch this episode in replay and you enjoyed it, please like it. Your votes tell YouTube that this is an episode worth proposing to other viewers outside our community. So that little click of the YouTube like button can be an important step in our Going Beyond the Core campaign. Thank you for remembering. Subscribe, watch, enjoy, and like. We're now ready to kick off our program with To The Point. To The Point is a segment that we intend to bring from time to time to our live guests. It is dedicated to sharing with you cutting-edge policy, business, and process re-engineering, as well as tech innovations in an executive summary. It will be in a one-to-one type format where I engage with a thought leader or a personality from the identity community. Today, we're very pleased to kick off this brand new segment with Liv Nordhaug. So join me in welcoming Liv. I understand Liv is joining us from the UN General Assembly session, which is supposed to be back to back with our session. But I see that Liv has arrived. So.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have arrived. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome. Welcome to this session. Actually, to start this, explain to the audience the two hats that you wear so we can establish your credentials.
Yes, I co-lead the Digital Public Goods Alliance, and this alliance, the secretariat for that is co-hosted by the government of Norway and UNICEF. So I guess my other hat is that I'm located in the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD, as a co-lead. So I'm based in Norway in the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation. Thank you.
Welcome. So today we'll focus mostly on one hat that you're wearing, which has to do with the Digital Public Goods Alliance. Now, what's the objective of the Digital Public Goods Alliance?
I think it can be said quite simply as the main aim is to accelerate really the Sustainable Development Goal agenda with a particular focus on supporting low and middle income countries. And we do believe that digital public goods can really be a kind of node of an ecosystem that can help us shift how we think about international development assistance and the digital development in general. Okay. So that's the presumption.
Okay, we are going to sort of delve deeper into the topic, but let's take it step by step. One of the things that we've been hearing a lot about lately has been the so-called GovStack. Many countries, many governments are sort of consolidating a lot of their IT developments and many of the sectorial developments into GovStacks. So where does the GovStack fit, and how should we think of it?
Yes, no, so I can speak to that from how we have approached it. So when we think about, there are many concepts used. And digital public goods can are open source technologies that are relevant for the Sustainable Development Goals. But you can think of a particular subset of digital public goods that are those that can be deployed by countries as part of their digital public infrastructures. And if you think of these digital public infrastructures, you can envisage those as having several layers, and layers can be combined into a stack. And the layers that are most frequently mentioned are indeed digital identity, often in combination with the civil registration and verification systems as a complement. And then there are digital payment solutions and data exchange systems. Those are very frequently mentioned as part of a GovStack. And I do believe that the concept, at least it's very frequently used in relation to India. But I think more and more countries are taking this stack approach because these types of technologies are seen as very, together they can enable a large set of sector use cases and really help accelerate attainment of goals across multiple sectors. So that's my take. And we have also approached this more and more in the Digital Public Goods Alliance as a priority for us.
So it's fair to say that this is sort of a foundational infrastructure that's shared by many sectors that the government could put in place and could accelerate and could help avoid redundant developments by different sectors.
Yes, that's correct. And I would also like to mention that there is actually something called the GovStack Initiative. That is, we are seeing more and more the synergies with the Digital Public Goods Alliance. This has been started by Estonia, Germany, ITU, and DIAL. And it has the same basis. And Germany has now joined the Digital Public Goods Alliance. So we are really aligning with that initiative also.
Okay, so obviously, whether you call it GovStack or you call it sort of a foundational infrastructure for public infrastructure, what do you think are the important design principles that governments should be paying attention to when they put such an important and foundational, obviously this is not something you want to be doing every year. You want to be building for the future, right? So
yes. No, I think, as with all foundations, they should be something you can build on long term. But I think in the digital world, maybe more than in the physical world, you really need, and you have the opportunity to be able to evolve your foundations also to respond to new needs. But then there are some principles you must take into account to ensure that, and that is, of course, interoperability between the different layers of a stack, for instance, and making sure that you have that as a government, that you have that strategic opportunity or that sovereignty, as I called it when I entered, to do that. So that brings me to the issue of vendor lock-in, for instance, which I'm aware that it is an issue that has also been highlighted by ID for Africa. I came across the survey you did in 2018, for instance, where vendor lock-in was ranked as one of the key concerns, as the key concern by the African identity community. And I do think it is tremendously important to avoid being locked in to something that prevents you from making that evolution to meet also future needs. And then, of course, inclusion and best practices that are well embedded, I think, in the sustainable principles for sustainable identification, for instance, that you should make sure that your foundations serve everyone and that they include everyone and leave no one behind, and that they are safe and that they are trusted. Those, I would say, are some key guiding principles.
Okay, so let's take a look at the sovereignty. It is a concept that is not really explored extensively. I mean, we hear about it, but it feels like good hygiene. But I think what we need to talk about is sort of how do we achieve sovereignty? I mean, I am trying to build systems, and what's the flip side of the coin? What do I pay in order to get sovereignty?
Yeah, so when we talk about digital public goods, it's really about being able to adopt and adapt. And I'm going to be a bit sneaky, Joseph, because as you mentioned, I am coming just from a UN General Assembly high-level call where I had the opportunity to speak between UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore and also UNDP's Administrator Achim Steiner. And I will actually reuse a couple of my points from there, because that is indeed what digital public goods are about as well. Because I did make a point there about sovereignty. And what I did say is that we are also seeing this is not only a low and middle income country phenomenon. And I think it's very important to emphasize. So I did quote, for instance, the Digitalization Agency of Norway. And I do want to read out that particular quote, if you will allow me, for this audience very quickly.
Please.
When you build a digital solution on top of proprietary software, you have in practice lost the control of your own future. For instance, if the vendor chooses to phase out the product. So that is one statement. And then it says, if you had used open source software as your base, you would in the same situation have been able to make a fork, or someone else could have made one that you could continue using. So I think that highlights something. And also the UK government is really stressing that government officials should be looking to open source first. They should consider that first before they go proprietary. So the point I made in where I just came from is that we're always talking about, about practicing what we preach. But I also think it's important for the international development community to actually start to preach what we are practicing.
Right.
Because the world is, I think many countries are reaching the same conclusion at the same time. So I think I do want to challenge that we haven't thought a lot about the digital sovereignty, because I think many countries are now embedding this as core part of their government policies. So I think we need to make sure at least that in an international development scene, we are not advocating the way we did things 10 years ago, for instance, in Norway. We have to talk about what we're doing today. So I think that's a very important point that that should be that everyone should be challenged on.
But would you go as far as saying that sovereignty implies open source?
I think sovereignty at least implies that if you're going to buy proprietary, you have to be very, very good at procuring and specifications. You have to be very good at anticipating your future needs, and you have to be extremely tough at negotiating the right contracts.
But we know in reality, nobody has the vision of what our future requires and needs. And so it's virtually impossible to actually build a specification for something that's going to last 10 years in the way technology is changing. So practically speaking, the only way I could do this is if I could do it myself.
In a way, you are answering your own question. So yes,
right. I mean, you're leading me down that path, because you're leaving me with no option.
Yeah, but what I want to say though is that this is not it's not a quick fix. It's not a silver bullet, because it can, first of all, open source can also go very wrong, in the sense that you do need expertise and capacity to implement open source and to adopt and adapt to local needs. And this capacity really it takes time to build up. And there are many issues that need to be taken into account, but particularly, and I want to stress that today we're particularly talking about digital public infrastructure. We're talking about the foundations. I don't think it is necessarily equally important higher up in a way in the chain, but now we're talking about the foundations that you build the rest of your house on.
Right, but what about, the risk? Typically, what I hear in talking to government officials, they basically say, yes, sovereignty is a wonderful thing, but my problem is I need immediacy. I need to be able to build this infrastructure now. And my fear is if I'm doing it myself, I don't have the capacity, and as a consequence, I risk failure. So how do we address that issue?
Well, I think this is a challenge, and you mentioned my two hats. So if we challenge the international development agencies and the stakeholders in that system, I think we have to be very mindful of promoting this capacity building, and it really should have started not even yesterday. It should have started many years ago. I do think it's happening in many instances now, but I do think we have to pay a lot of attention to it. But I do think one great opportunity that comes with open source that can help address part of that concern is the opportunity to actually build capacity while implementing. So because there is this opportunity for agency and for building capacity and trust through agency, because the technology allows you to do that. So that's one point. But we need to have systems in place that support that. And that could be, academics, scholarship structures. It could be ways of being able to do paid implementation research while also being part of your country's implementation journey. You have great examples for this, for instance, in health, with something called the DHIS2 and the Health Information Systems Program, which has done that. So I think that is at least one good opportunity. And of course, there is also there's a huge role to play for commercial vendors, also in an open source ecosystem, or a system where the code itself is open, and that is for integration services.
Right.
So you can have models that are very closely centrally government managed, or you can have models at least where a lot of the actual implementation is outsourced. But you still retain the opportunity to evolve the software. And that is the great part. So you can do a lot of the same things and procure services that you need. And I think the World Bank and the UN and the whole multilateral system is tremendously important in supporting countries to do that right. And I do want to commend, for instance, ID4D and G2PX in the World Bank for doing excellent work on country technical assistance, also for countries that are increasingly looking to adopt open source, like MOSIP, for instance.
Mm-hmm. But actually, there is a dimension which is capacity capacity building needs to be sustainable and long-term and needs to be deep, in the sense that you have a bench which you continually populate with talent, et cetera, The fear that I have is that I don't see in the development agenda, development priorities, I don't see grants that are given to governments that say, we are going to be giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars available for training 20, 30 people in your staff. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think the development agenda is going to evolve to allow for that? That's what's needed.
Well, I can at least promise you, Joseph, that this is indeed one of the areas that I am really, through the Digital Public Goods Alliance, working to try to change and to leverage. And I do see increasing willingness to do more funding for capacity building. So yes, I think I will be confident enough to say that I think change is coming. I think COVID-19 is actually helping accelerate that change because of the increasing demand for improving social safety nets and being able to for governments to pay, for instance, out subsidies and support to vulnerable populations. So yes, but it's not coming. We have to work hard to make that change, but I think it's something that is about to happen. Yes.
Excellent. So we have a lot more to come with you. Let me just pause 1 second and see anybody in the community voices would like to join the panel with me and Liv. Please raise your hand. We'll bring you on. In the meantime, there's another element that I think creates a significant concern, which is when we do capacity building, there's a fear of brain drain. What happens is you basically train these people and they get picked up by industry and they're able to benefit from that training. So how do we address that issue?
Yeah, no, and I'm happy I got that question, and I do want to revisit the example I touched upon earlier. So I do really believe that there can be something in collaboration with academia here, because and I have experience working on human resource development in the public sector in a different sector back in the days in Timor-Leste, where I experienced this and saw this very closely. I do think that a combination of having, for instance, the opportunity to have scholarships that can allow government staff, for instance, to do a PhD, a postdoc, assuming, of course, that you have qualified staff at the starting point. That can be a way where you could potentially be involved in implementation research and actually in implementing the systems in your own country, while earning also a salary that makes it much more attractive to stay on as you're building up very attractive, internationally attractive qualifications.
Right.
So I think at least that is one model, but it's not an easy problem to address. But I think we have seen examples that this can help.
Okay, so I'm going to take a couple of questions. There's quite a few coming in. So let's start with a question. Since identity is a sovereign issue, what role do you envisage for private players in support of nations achieving their digital identity goals?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. And as I did say, I do think there's a huge role to play for the private sector. But I do think, and I do believe actually, Joseph, that this was highlighted in the ID for Africa survey that I did cite from, that it's not providing the proprietary technology itself. The role can be around service delivery, around implementation. It could be both managing, but also providing integration services. I do, however, stress that we do also need to pay attention to local vendor capacity building to make sure that we're not only building up international giants also in the integration service delivery, but that we really do not miss that opportunity for local vendor capacity building. But I do think there's a huge opportunity, but you can still have governments in the driver's seat of their journeys.
In a way, some would say that open source is changing the value chain, shifting the value add. Instead of the core value, you're shifting it to business logic, integration logic, integration services, etc., etc. So, but then, since the core is not going to be commercialized, how do you see the sustainability and the continued development of the core, since it's free?
Yeah, and we have spent a lot of time pondering this in the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And so let me give you a set of assumptions. I'm assuming that international development assistance, for instance, both from the government donor community and the philanthropic community, is not going to end overnight. I'm assuming that it's going to stay on for at least for some decades longer. And if you agree with my assumption on that, I do think that being able to core fund digital public goods that can be the nuclei that you're asking about, like those core softwares that do need to remain open, that do need to have no strings attached, so to speak.
Right.
I think that can be a very important role that the international development community can play and that we should play. And increasingly, this is what we're seeing happening. So for instance, MOSIP is co-funded by philanthropic and government donors, right? There are other examples as well. So I think rather than forcing these digital public goods to invent commercial models around maintaining the core, I think the focus should be on the core maximizing the global public good. And I think we don't need more resources to do that, to be honest, because there's a lot of international development assistance going to digitalization initiatives. I think we just need to shift what we fund and to fund it more effectively and to fund it together, which we can with the digital public goods.
Okay, excellent. I just want to take one question and then end with one item with you. Might there be a danger of emphasizing technical solutions but ignoring fragmentation and other kinds of political challenges within governance systems that will not be taken into account in a more holistic way? I'm not sure. Amanda Hammer asked that. Yeah,
I think I'm not sure if that is well, yes, it is a concern, but I don't know if that is a concern that's unique to open source, to be honest. Yeah. I think that's a concern for all digitalization initiatives. They all have to be any kind of risk assessment, do no harm assessment, etc., needs to be seen in relation to the context. You need to have enabling regulatory frameworks, for instance, around privacy, protection issues, etc., inclusion. All of this needs to be in place. This readiness needs to be there, regardless of whether or not the solution that is being implemented comes from an open source alternative or a proprietary. I would like to add, however, that if the solution that's being implemented comes from an open source alternative, at least you can look under the hood at how that solution has been designed in the first place, which is not always the case with the proprietary solution. So I would say that open source comes maybe out better, but there's still the need to have a deep understanding of the context.
We've got some few people who are joining the community voices. Actually, am I pronouncing it correctly? Delaney Diel, is that? Please introduce yourself and state your purpose.
Yes, it is Delaney Diel. I am the executive head of a digital identity company in South Africa called Secure Citizen.
Okay.
Really nice to meet you, Liv, and thank you for the very insightful information that you've given so far. In South Africa, we are quite advanced from having digital onboarding companies, but digital identity is something that has been a new topic of discussion, and we have quite a few local bodies driving this initiative, both banks and non-banks, from the private sector predominantly. What, in your experience, has been the key way to bring the private and the government sectors together in a harmonious way that does not slow down the process, but continues to enable, because it's all for the purpose of the individuals in the country, right? But in South Africa, there is a massive difference in terms of the low income and the high income earners, and a very rich culture that is quite widely spread. So there's lots of barriers to entry. But although COVID-19 has been a great driver of needing digital identity and needing access to digital services, especially when we went through our lockdowns, it is something that is not easily or quickly attained. So from a private sector perspective, we are driving at the rate of knots to try and get it there in an interoperable way. So we're not a digital onboarding company. We work with digital onboarding companies to create a digital identity solution. But we don't want to leave government behind, and we also want to partner with government. But what has been your experience in terms of driving the greatest amount of collaboration to get that done?
Thank you. Thank you.
I can try to answer that, but I do want to stress that I don't work directly with governments as such. The DPGA, we work very much as a distributed alliance, meaning that we work closely with stakeholders that do work directly with governments, and we also have a lot of direct contact. So I have not been directly involved in an implementation myself. What I do see is that the international, like the community, the UN and the World Bank, for instance, is playing an important role. And what I'm hearing is that, for instance, having a national champion and having like the agenda, the drive to implement such a system needs to be anchored at the highest political level. I hear that as a frequent challenge, that if you don't have that political buy-in, for instance, and that should ideally be at the prime minister or president level, because particularly with identity systems, they cut across all sectors. They're not owned by one ministry in particular. And I'm assuming that that's one of the challenges you're facing. So this is more reciting what I've heard as common blockers. And as I was saying, I do think there is a very, very important role for the commercial vendors to play. But I do think that there needs to be the management of that process needs to rest somehow with the highest level of government if it is going to be a successful implementation. I don't actually know if that answered your question, and I don't know South Africa that well, but at least I think my key, the key learning I've had is that you do need to have that political buy-in at the top level, and without that, it is very difficult.
Okay, thank you.
That does answer. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ibrahim, could you please present yourself and state your purpose? Welcome. Could you unmute yourself, please? Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes, yes, please.
Good day, Doctor. My name is Deputy Controller General Nuhu Ibrahim, calling you from Kano in Nigeria, joining you from Kano in Nigeria. I worked with the Nigerian Immigration Service for about 3.5 decades, and I'm a retired immigration officer. So I think I just want to make some comments on the issue of vendor locking with technologies, especially in the area of data management or getting identity of travelers and maybe foreigners residing in Nigeria. It's right, it's true that there is this issue of vendor locking, but there's another perspective that Liv raised, that the question of ensuring that you have a sound contractual agreement with these vendors. I think this is one of the fundamental problems that we are having in Nigeria, having a contract and then you find that you cannot, sometimes the legal practitioners, I'm sorry to say, on the government side may sometimes go out of their way and enter into some agreement that you find that even the government cannot go out of this. I think this is one of the issues that the areas that have to be looked into. There are so many examples of these issues in Nigeria, and these are areas that we need to look at critically and ensure that you have freedom of going in and going out of any agreement with any vendor.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. Thank you. Liv, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I would actually love to build on that excellent point, because I do think there are so many countries now that have experienced some of the same challenges. And I do, I would want to encourage us, and I do think that you can indeed help on this, Joseph, that is to help countries learn from each other's experiences. And I do think there is one crucial word we have to look at here, and that is procurement. How do countries go about procurement? What are learnings around procuring services for open source that others could benefit from? But also, particularly if we look at low-income countries, who are the agencies supporting and advising countries on procurement? So I do think, again, I mentioned ID4D, but I do think also there are, you will have UNDP, there will be different agencies, donors, international development donors, bilateral donors. And as a group, we need to address the issue of how we do procurements and how we support procurements, regardless, I would say, of whether or not they are for open source or proprietary, to make sure that countries retain that digital sovereignty. And I would say that digital public goods enable that to a larger level. So I think I would like to end there. It's not a quick fix, but it opens the door, I would say.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There are a lot of topics that I would have liked to cover with you, but we ran out of time. I will keep them for next time, especially the innovation aspect of things. I know you're busy. You have to be at the General Assembly, and good luck. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we hope to hear from you once again in the near future. Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Bye-bye.
We now continue our segment our second segment with the part one, where we will welcome the South Africa. Just received a note saying that actually we have with us Mr. Tine, who's the Chief Director of Policy and Strategic Management, who's filling in for the Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, who was called in last minute when we started the show. Okay, welcome, Mr. Tine, and the floor is yours.
No, thank you very much, Doc. What a very interesting subject you've just had with the colleague. Just to respond also to what Dylan was raising around digital identity. We are already working on that project. In fact, we've had some few meetings with some colleagues from the bank. We're also undertaking a study on digital identity. There's quite a lot of work we are doing around modernizing the identity system in South Africa. Okay. I will want then to go straight to my presentation. I'll try to be as brief as possible so that we allow enough time for discussion. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
So as you can see, we are working on the policy. We quite advanced on the policy. At the same time, we are modernizing our system. The title of the presentation is saying securing the identity of all people who live in South Africa. You will see that we are not only focusing on citizens, our focus is on everyone who lives in the country. I won't bore you with the details in terms of the background. This was the background in terms of public consultation that we undertook in this year. This is the roadmap towards the finalization on the policy on the management of identity in South Africa. Just as a way of giving you background, our journey starts before 1994. That is before a democratic government, where you had various departments that were responsible for managing identity in South Africa. In fact, for Black people, we had a different system that was catering for them. For colored people, for Indians and whites, you had different systems. But with the advent of democracy in 1994, then we embarked on the process of integrating the department into one department. Now, the department that is responsible for managing official identity or legal identity in South Africa is the Department of Home Affairs. So since 1994, we've embarked on the process of improving and securing the population register. Our population register, it stores personal data from birth to death of all citizens, as well as people who have got permanent resident status in the country and refugees. The years from 1994 to 2000 saw the department driven by the imperative of bringing together everyone to the system, basically. We think we've done very well in terms of including most people to the system, but there are still some gaps that exist on the system, as there are people, including our citizens, who remain either undocumented or improperly documented. By improperly documented, we are referring to a large extent to transgender community or just broadly non-binary persons, because our system is binary. It caters for males and females. So one of the changes that we are bringing on board is to make sure that everyone who lives in the country, irrespective of your race, irrespective of your gender, of your sex or sex orientation, you are documented accordingly. So as part of a major investment we've made in technology modernization, the department launched an smart ID card system in 2013. This card is a massive improvement from the insecure green ID book. It's basically, we have a digital photo on your card, and it carries your biometrics. It can carry other cards, other information. It can carry your social security information on that card. You can also carry on that card in future your driver's license. So immediately you can cut off other cards by using our card as a Home Affairs. Basically, this is just the number. This number has definitely changed. In April 2020, we had about 15,500,000 people already on smart ID cards. This has definitely changed as we speak today. As I've said, there are still some gaps. As a result, the department decided on developing a new policy. We have decided to align the language with the language of international community, including the World Bank, for instance, how we define official identity. In terms of the scope of this policy, that will then define how we manage official identity. Basically saying the official identity policy lays a policy foundation for repositioning the Department of Home Affairs as a sole provider of official identity and status services for citizens and non-citizens. In order to make sure that we safeguard the personal information of citizens and non-citizens who live in the country, the policy requires the department to introduce at least the following intervention. We need to amend the Identification Act. We need to amend the Alteration and Sex Description and Sex Status Acts. These are the acts that deals with identity. Some of them they are seen as unconstitutional as they discriminate against other groups. Key principles that will be embedded in the new legislation, they include issues around human dignity, non-discrimination, and equality. The legislation will further affirm the right to privacy for establishing a protection regime for citizens and all non-citizens. Enhancement of the population register records by ensuring that no one, irrespective of their status, is left behind without a legal record of existence. Doc, I'm sure this language you are used to. We've met, but at a distance where you are presenting on these issues, where we say no one should be left behind without a legal record of existence. The other focus area for the work that you are doing around securing identity for everyone is around the integration of Department of Home Affairs information management system. We are planning to introduce a new system. We call it a national identity system. The NIS will enable a single view of a person and interface with all other government and private sector identity management system to enable e-government and e-commerce. We are already doing this, but at a very limited scale. For instance, banks, insurances, and some government departments are able to verify with us the details of every person, especially at this stage, citizens. The NIS will enable us to do this with everyone within the country. Further modernization and integration of systems mean that the Department of Home Affairs must introduce an auto biometric identification system, which will enable capturing of more biometrics. Currently, the Home Affairs National Identity System only records two, in fact, it records biometrics and biographic. It only records a photo and only fingerprints as biometrics. The AP system will enable the department to record more than that. So quickly, in terms of what the policy is introducing around the population register records, which it's referring here to, normally the language would be civil register. That will be your birth, identity, marriage, and death, including citizenship and migration status. So we are not able to record everyone currently. So what we are therefore proposing is that every birth that takes place in the country, irrespective of the status of a parent, must be recorded on the population register. This will include capturing of biometrics for everyone. We are also saying record of all vital events, births, marriage, and death for citizens and non-citizens will be recorded on the population register. Again, this is irrespective of the status of a person in the country. The second focus area for our policies where we deal with the integration of our systems. I've spoken to this when I was speaking to the background that we want to integrate all our systems to one system so that we are able to have a single view of our client. So the national identity system will be introduced. The automated biometric identification system, ABIS, we are already rolling this out, but in a few years it will be fully rolled out. This is basically the representation of what I was talking about in terms of the national identity system. As I was saying, it will enable the full integration of the DHA and other critical information systems of government. It will also enable a single view and status of citizens and non-citizens in the country. This is basically the representation of that. On my extreme right, this is what the national identity system will enable through biometrics. You'll be able to verify birth, death, and marriage, all personal information. Obviously, in South Africa, we've got a new legislation that has come into operation, which is called protection of personal information. So verification will also be guided by that system. So we regard Home Affairs as a critical enabler of e-government and e-commerce. So what you see there, given that not all of you are from South Africa, but in the middle, that is your smart ID card. That is how it looks like. So it will be able to provide data, real-time data to all our clients. IEC, this is the Independent Electoral Commission for social grants. Social grant, it will be able to provide real-time data on whether the person is a citizen or what is the status of the person in the country, or whether the person is still alive or dead. Same thing with education. BMD on top left means birth, marriage, and death. That is largely your insurance companies that require to verify with the department in terms of the status of the person, healthcare. So this is basically showing that in future, this is what you want to do with identity. The national identity system becomes a foundational system, identity system for all functional systems. All the systems around my identity, they're on the picture. They are functional systems that we have in the country. The other area that we have now, this is exactly what we were talking about in terms of our identity being binary and not being accommodative to non-binary persons. Basically, the intervention here, without giving you too much details, is to say our smart ID card has got an identity number, which if you look at digit number 7, it will either indicate whether you're a male or you're a female. So we are trying to move towards a gender neutral identity number. You don't have to be identified on your identity card that you're a male or a female, but on the system, the national identity system will have all the details, whether a male or female or a transgender, whatever your identity is, it will be there. The vision is to move towards a legal identity that is not dependent on your gender or on your sex. The second last area is around the age at which a person can be able to apply for an ID. Currently, you have to be 16 years. We are proposing that you must lower the age to 10 years. This is basically to make sure that everyone in the country has got the formal identity card, which at that point, we will be able to collect your biometrics so that it becomes easier to protect your identity and also to verify you. The last area, it's the area that deals with death registration. In South Africa, we've got a situation where you have people who have passed on, but their records are still live on our system. So it's dead alive kind of a situation. So here again, we are trying to make it compulsory for the registration of death, and we also putting stringent measures to say no person should be buried without a death certificate or without that death being registered with Home Affairs. And if that happens, we're going further to say it should be punishable by law. Doc, I think that's where I will end with my presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We have a lot of questions that are we're going to take them one by one, but just to help put a summary, you've basically created, you have a roadmap strategy with about 4 or 5 pillars on which you are going to reform your ID systems, and let's call them next generation ID system. The first strategy is that you are insisting on a no one left behind, total inclusion. You want to be able to include everybody. The second is that you are harmonizing your system so that an ecosystem can emerge, interoperable, integrated, single view, everything passes through DHA info system and supports all the functional systems. Then you're also proposing to reform your unique digital ID number, so that it becomes gender neutral, but also fit for purpose for the sake of supporting e-government and digital economy. And you're also trying to lower the age of registration to this platform from 16 to 10 years old. And you're also trying to bring in the exit, which is the death registration as a requirement. So all of these pillars require very specific actions. So we're going to ask a little bit of questions on that regard. For example, when we talk about no one left behind as a strategy of total inclusion, what is it that you are trying to put in place to achieve that objective? Are you opening up more centers? Are you training other functional groups to become registrars? How's this working?
Doc, thanks for that. We're doing we have more than one strategy. The first one, exactly, with regard to bed registration. Now we have opened more centers, health facilities. Most beds now are registered in our health facilities, and we've put the legal requirement that every bed must be registered within 30 days. So it makes it easy for parents. By the time a parent leaves the hospital or a clinic, will be leaving with a birth certificate. So that child will now be documented properly. So those are 2 interventions. Register within 30 days, we're increasing the facilities. With regard to registration of marriages, we are also now, currently it's Home Affairs officials who are appointed as marriage officers, and some religious leaders. We with this new policy and also policy on marriages, we want to open it up for all social groups to be able to be appointed as marriage officers, so that you can register as many marriages as possible We're also partnering with religious organizations, especially the Muslim communities where you need to conduct a burial within very few hours. So yes, those are some of the interventions. We're also banks as Nordhaug. You can apply for an ID from a bank. That is another way of opening more platform or avenues.
Right. But are you using social programs to incentivize parents or mothers to register their children? For example, is there a grant if you bring your child and you register the birth? Are you able to give them social assistance?
The benefit is it's Home Affairs. There's also a Department of Social Development. For you to be able to access your child grant, you must have a form of identification. Obviously, we allow for at least 3 months those who do not have a birth certificate, but after 3 months, you have to have your child registered. Yes, we do use those social programs, yes.
Okay, let's run through many of the questions that are coming in. There are a lot of questions for you. First question, what is the plan to deduplicate identity stored in various functional ID systems? Are you going to seed the unique ID number that is unique and deduplicated by giving it to the other databases and then they can find duplicates, or how's this going to work?
We're using our identity. Initially, what we're proposing, we wanted to go in Estonia direction where you have one identity, you have one number for every day. But right. At this stage, we are not there yet, but that is what the bigger vision is. Okay,
but you will supply them, and then the functional databases will be able to decide whether they add a number or they relate that number or there's a lookup table.
In fact, in most systems, our identity number is the foundational number that they are using to verify the person, even to play their systems, yes.
Okay, so the one question that came in, does the DHA have a timeline for revamping South Africa's identity systems? What is happening with regards to data cleansing and the quality of information in the civil registry? I mean, you've outlined a vision, you did a consultation, you received 400 communications and inputs. What is your timeline for implementation, assuming the cabinet will validate?
So the timeline with this, okay, there are two elements to this. With the official identity policy project, we started in 2019, and it's part of what we are calling the repositioning program of the department, which runs from 2019 to 2029. We already have a modernization program that is focusing on cleaning our data as well as digitizing our records. We've got very old records which remain manual. So we are already partnering with some institutions of the state to make sure that we digitize our records.
That's another question that came in. Are you going to allow businesses to verify the identity of an individual in country, citizen or non-citizen, through the NIS? Will they be able to have access to the authentication services?
We already have that in place. Even before we fully implement the national identity system, institutions, they partner with us, we sign MOUs with them, and then they are able to do online verification.
And it's open to any sector or specific sectors like banking? I mean, do you have to have legislation?
It's open to any sector. It's by application, and then an MOU is signed between the department and that institution. The condition should be the institution that requires that information must have secure systems. Similarly, the level of security will have to be similar to ours so that you don't compromise data, but they will only be verifying, they won't be changing anything on the system.
Okay. Another question about death registration. Will the death be registered if the person is not in the NIS? Will be manual death certificates be phased out? How will unknown people be registered if they die?
That is a very good question. We still engage with that question, but we are not phasing out manual death certificate. What we're doing at this stage is to improve the capacity of our system to capture or to record death of every person, like people who are undocumented in the country. We issue them with the paper-based death notice, which is not on our system. That is the biggest challenge that we're sitting with now. Because as long as that is not on our system, few years down the line, paper-based systems, they do not have a good longevity. So that's where the challenge is right now. Okay.
Actually, if anybody wants to join the community voices, we are opening community voices to you. Join me and the director to discuss. Let's continue with some of the issues and questions. Can you explain a little bit better your approach to sex and gender? I assume at birth there is a medical registration which basically registers the sex. So that will always be what you register at birth. But at what point in time would you allow somebody to take a different, select a different category for their gender that is inconsistent or different than their sex at birth? How does this work? We get a lot of practical questions about this. How should we do this?
So the initial thought around this is at the time when birth is registered, parents will be given an opportunity right then to choose whether they want a binary or a non-binary ID.
Even at birth, they are given that opportunity.
When we register birth, we will grant that opportunity so that when the child reaches a majority age, will then decide like which sex or which gender they want to assume. That is the initial thought that we are taking through as we engaging with stakeholders.
And so it's possible that your biological sex, for example, will not be recorded. Is it possible?
At this stage, what we understand is that you can register in terms of your binary on the system. But for you to choose gender that is different to your sex, there is an act that we call alteration of sex status in the country. Currently you need to go through the process, medical process for that. But we're still engaging, in fact, even with the LGBTIQ community on how can we navigate that, because eventually where we are driving is at the point where your identity should not depend on your gender or your sex. That is the vision, but how to get there, there's a lot of consultation that is still happening.
Okay, actually, what would you say, are you able to share with us any surprises that came out of the 400 consultations that you've conducted? And this is, by the way, was a wonderful process that you were able to engage and collaboratively, before you ended up acting, you asked the community and the civil society to join. And I understand there were 400 engagements that you've had. Took a long time. Anything that you could share with us about this process? And would you recommend it to other latecomers in this game?
So what I can share, in fact, this morning I had a meeting with the team as we are finalizing another very I don't want to say controversial, but it's making people to talk a lot, a policy on marriage. I was saying to them, we need someone who write, if there is no one who has done it, writes a book or a thesis on challenges of crafting a policy for the minority at the time in an environment where the dominant culture is against the minority. So the biggest surprise that I learned is in South Africa, we speak about unity in diversity. But when you go down to issues of identity, you realize that you're far apart in terms of getting that unity in terms of identity. For me, that was an eye-opener, and it made me realize that if you are in a minority, you have a serious challenge for you to get your rights recognized when the dominant culture is against you.
I understand. So, okay. I mean, will you mentioned somebody will write a book. Will there be a report about some of the sort of consultations? What they are these public records, or are they simply private consultations?
No. What we will do at the end of the process, we are required. There is a legislation in South Africa, promotion of access to public information. We will make the consultation report available so that stakeholders will know what were the main issues that we dealt with, because we had instances where we had bilateral engagement with interest groups. We also had instances where we had, like for instance, the minister convened a national conference with stakeholders from various groups, some of them quite opposed to each other, but we as government, we've got to manage those different views in a way that everyone is protected at the end of the day.
Okay, there's one question that came in. It says, in the light of the new POPI Act, how would you ensure that there's trust in the system? I can already imagine there would be concern around the increased collection of biometrics and the security of the information. So now you're talking about more data, more sensitive data, and this data is used for more things such as e-government, other things. So what are you doing to practically improve security and also data protection?
The NIS and ABIS, those two systems, they are geared towards ensuring that our system is as secure as possible. Number two, for every profile of a person that we have, for every profile to be amended or to be changed in future, the data subject or the owner of that personal information will have to be notified if there is any breach to the system or if the record is being amended. Because in the past, we have had situations where people's profiles were changed, like all of a sudden you discover that you've got another child on the system or you are married. So in future, before any record can be changed, the data subject will have to give consent to the change. Yeah.
Okay. So access to data would have to give consent. Okay. If we understood correctly, and there's 4 or 5 questions on the subject, basically you're going to go from a 7-digit ID number to a 13-digit number. And the questions are, how is this transition going to happen? Is it going to happen when they renew, or are you going to call up the population to say, as of this date, you must have the new number, so come and recover it? How's the process? Do you have that in mind yet?
So what we are finalizing our communication strategy, but what's going to happen is for those who prefer to remain with a binary ID, they don't have to update anything in terms of the identity number.
So
Where
it's
where changes are happening is those who are now going for a non-binary or a gender-neutral ID. So that's where like we will be expecting a lot of engagement and people coming to update their record. We will invite.
Okay, but will that not complicate the digital economy? Because if you are able to basically have 13 or 7, the banks that want to do a transaction don't know what to expect, 7 digits or 13 digits, or will you say if you want to join the economy, you need the 13?
No, sorry, Doc. The number remains 13. There remain 13 digits. The only change is the 7th digit.
Oh, the 7 digits that are the gender.
Yes. Yeah, that's the one that's the determine whether you're a male or a female. That's the only change that we will be making on the ID.
What? I'm a little bit confused. Excuse me. Why is it 7 digits? It must be the date of birth as well, isn't it?
So we wanted to go so initially we wanted to go for a number that is generated by the system. But it became clear that if we go that route, it's too early for South Africa. Like there are many other systems that depend on your ID number, on your date of birth, like your social grants, they depend on that. When it comes to your citizenship status, your voters roll depend on that. But there was an option when we went out for consultation of having a number that is generated by the machine. Maybe in future, that is something that would be considered. But as for now, there are too many risks when we remove the current number. Okay, so just to summarize, how long is the number today and how long will it be when they ask for a gender neutral non-binary number? There are 13 digits and they will remain 13. Okay. What will happen is when you get to the 7th number, it's for non-binary, it won't denote whether you're a female or you're a male. I understand. So it's the 7th digit that is being, it's not 7 digits, but it's the 7th digit that will simply be non-indicative. Okay. Just last call for any, one question from the Congo, from RDC, République Démocratique du Congo. They're asking, can you explain a little bit about the connection between the civil register and with the national ID system? How does the birth certificate or the civil record feed into the national ID today, and how do you see it happening tomorrow? So at birth, when we are issued with a birth certificate, you are immediately allocated an ID number. And your ID number will either indicate that currently we accommodate for 3 groups. It will either indicate that you are a citizen, or it will either indicate that you are a permanent resident, or it will either indicate that you are a refugee. So if you are a citizen, already when you, citizens, permanent residents, and refugees, they qualify for IDs in South Africa. So when you reach age 16, you then qualify to apply for identity document. So that is the connection between the civil registration and our identification. And for minority groups or individuals who were never registered before, will they be excluded? Will they fall between the cracks? How do you avoid that? For minority groups, meaning those who have never been issued with a birth certificate. Right. So those who have never been issued with a birth certificate who are citizens, what we have, we've got a program that we call late registration of birth, where we do more investigation on whether the person is really a citizen or is not a citizen.
Right.
If a person is not a citizen, for instance, if a person is an asylum seeker, that person then will be provided information on how to apply for an asylum seeker is a refugee who is not yet approved as a refugee in the country. You'll be directed how to apply for that.
Okay, so no one is left behind, even if they are not documented at birth. You can accompany them. You can reach a point to determine through investigation what their status should be. Okay, we have a community voice. I think after that, we're going to move on. Mr. Ibrahim, could you please present yourself and state your message?
Yes, I thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you well, except the light behind you is giving us backlit. Okay, this is good. This is good.
Yeah. Thank you for your mate for your presentation. It's very interesting topic, and I'm really appreciate for that to present it in the African continent. My question is, how post-conflict countries such as in Somalia can build a national data system on the civil registration on the citizen? We know that the Somalia was collapsed in 1991 and still is struggling to build on the nation state. And data registration is very important. So I would like to how the strategic framework that can follow to the Somali government. Thank you very much.
So what advice do you have for countries post-conflict, basically?
In Somalia.
Yes.
So Somali government.
Yes, we got the question. So, Director, could you please?
Right.
Can you share any insight?
Job for every country, the most important entry to the population register is by ensuring that every birth is registered on your system. So that will be my advice in terms of birth registration. To seeing that Somalia is recovering from I don't know what is the right word to use, but as it is recovering politically and economically, that I think that is words I can use. Late birth registration, it will assist the government of Somalia. We also work with other institutions like Doc, as you're asking, around social security. If you have social programs, you can partner with the department that provides social security to encourage. It will encourage or even force people to come and apply for their identity
and register already. So basically, pay attention to the National Population Register, which is essentially the civil register, taking into account as early as you can, and those who are not registered, try to get them late registration so that their birth is noted and they have a record of their legal existence. I mean, at the end of the day, once you have a record of your legal existence, everything else opens up.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, we have many other questions. You clearly are exciting interest, as I expected. But unfortunately, we need to move on. I thank you very much for your participation. I thank the Department of Home Affairs of South Africa, who had kindly hosted us in 2019.
Yes.
We had wonderful annual meeting there. Hopefully, we'll have you again at some point in our live casts in the near future as we continue to watch closely your progress towards identity for all. Thank you again. And
that would be
thank
great.
you. Operator, please prepare the next segment where we are going to now move to Kenya. And with us, we have two pillars in the identity authorities of Kenya, one representing the national ID and one representing the civil registration. Ruben is actually the ID for Africa ambassador for Kenya. And of course, Janet Musheru is the deputy ambassador of ID for Africa as well. Actually, operator, bring Janet just for a photo op as well, and then we can launch in the session. Thank you both for being with us. It's wonderful to see Kenya with us in this session, and I just welcome you. And I guess we are going to launch two presentations. That does not mean that civil registration and national ID are not integrated. I assure you they are integrated. But from a presentation point of view, we felt it was good to focus on national ID first and then civil registration. So operator, let us start with the first part. Yeah, operator, please share the screen.
So thanks so very much for this opportunity to present the Kenya legal regime. My name is Ruben Kemodo. I'm the Director of Secretary National Registration Services. Later on, my colleague Janet Musheru, the Director and also Secretary of Civil Registration Systems, will be making her presentation. The highlight of our presentation will be on various areas. First of all, we have started with the current vision and foundation of identity. Kenya has had a very long history of identity registration systems. And the essence of bringing the historical part of it is to demonstrate to my colleagues that for Kenya, we use the pre-existing data for purpose of upgrading and coming up with a new system. For example, 1915 is the time we started our ID registration system started by the colonial government, and for services, hard tax and labor. And the same utilization of the ID that time is even relevant today. In 1947, it was open to all the races. And for the first time, in 1978, is when now we had all the mandatory issuance of identity cards to all Kenyans. And after that time, 1980 now, it was also open to females. You can see 1915, it was only for males, all the way up to 1980. From 1978 to 1995, we have what we call a first generation identity card, which was purely manual. It had a lot of problems because we had not put in structures to check on illegal registration and manipulation of registration systems. So we used that data to ask Kenyans to register from 1995 when we came up with a centralized database. 1978, we didn't have a centralized database. It was being done in the registration centers over the country. So in 1995, we had a centralized database, but it was semi-manual because people would go to our registration centers. We have that 800 registration centers all over the country. And then their data, several data would be taken, and the biometrics would be taken manually, and it would be transported to Nairobi for purpose of processing of the identity card. But for anybody who had already been issued the identity card in 1978, would have to check the records and make sure that they match the particulars of that particular time. Because let me point out that Kenya has a big problem of neighbors trying to penetrate our system in terms of getting legal identity. In Kenya, an identity card for those above 18 is taken as a proof of citizenship. So 1995, there's a time now where we introduced the second generation identity card, and we have been having that identity card up to now. We have 28.5 million records in that system, and Kenyans, 28.5 million Kenyans already have that card, which forms 95% of our population. As I said, we are using first generation to train the second generation. And now, next. And now,
next slide.
Next slide, yes. Okay, those are the identity cards we have had since the colonial era. You can see the one for 1915. You can see the one for 1947, which was open to all the races. 1963 is the time we got independent, and we just changed the coat of arms. Then the first generation, 1978, and now 1995 is the one which is we call the second generation, which is using a plastic material. Now we have moved into a new card called the Huduma card, which is the third generation of identity card. Next slide. So let me now go to our Huduma. As I said, that's the third generation identity card system, which is more an upgrade of the second generation, but an automated one using an electronic system. And it was established by law, both through an executive order from the president. And again, we have also within our Registration of Persons Act incorporated the issuance and the registration of that card. The Huduma card entails a fully automation system, both from registration centers all the way to the processing of identity cards. Again, it aims at the integration of services from various organizations which are population related, like our revenue authority, our social security, our health security, and the driving license, and the immigration and civil registration. When it is perfected, because it is work in progress in the law, we issue both a minors cards for children at the age of 6 and an adult for a national card. And of course, we'll also be issuing the major card at 18. So far, over 10 million Huduma cards have already produced and distributed through the country. But let me point out that it is not a legal card yet, because our law is still in parliament. It has not been registered. So we are using both the second generation and the Huduma card simultaneously. Continue. Next slide. So the scope of the project, like I've said, is to undertake national biometric registration of all citizens, and we have already done that. We captured that 8.9, that 8.5 million records, and for both the foreigners and the children who are below 18, and again for the citizenry. And then we also wish to integrate and harmonize all the existing national registration databases in Kenya. For example, you find other organs which are involved in population aligned systems. They have their own national databases. Some of them have been trying to come up with electronic databases, and the government has found it feel that for purpose of cost cutting and also for purpose of harmonization, that all of them should be integrated into one national database. And again, a reference point where we reissue the one number at birth. My colleague will be talking about that later, how we are going about that. But for purpose of the current Huduma card or Huduma number which we are issuing, and for purpose of continuity, we are utilizing the same identity card number, which we hand, but of course, adding some prefix in the card for purpose of distinguishing it from the current card. And then again, the production and the issuance of Huduma number, unique to each person. Next slide. So first of all, let me point out that an ID card in Kenya is compulsory to all citizens by law. And you can be prosecuted for not having one or using one. 2, we are already using the identity card across our government commercial sectors and all other areas. Like now, right now, we are in the process of voter registration. We are going to have elections next year in August. And for updating of this voters register, everyone must have an identity card. And of course, for some of them, passports. Then again, when it will come to the day of the general elections, when voting, everybody must present an identity card, not a voter's card, but an identity card. We also have an e-citizen platform in Kenya where all the data from identity card system has been migrated to an e-citizen platform, and where all other Kenyans who require certain services are able to apply through the e-citizen, the e-citizen platform. Things like passports, birth certificates, and again, like a certificate of good conduct, and many others. You apply through that system. But let me point out that for Huduma, it is going to be an upgrade of the e-citizen platform using digitalized and better captured biometrics. So we are also building on the legal system, relying on the data. Like I've been pointed to say, in Kenya, we have decided that let's use the existing because we have a node legal regime. We have also had a lot of data which is existing. So we are using that one to identify missing gaps and then building a new ecosystems. Again, like I pointed out, enrollment is a work in progress. We captured that 8.5 million. Our population is allowed 50 million, and we are going to carry out another registration soon for purpose of capturing everybody into the new database. Within East African community, we have a protocol where identity cards can be used as a travel document. Right now, the authorities of Uganda and Rwanda have already recognized use of the identity card as a travel document. You can travel to Uganda, you can travel to Rwanda, and you can also travel to Kenya from those countries by use of the identity card. Continue. Next slide. Yes, the legal regimes, like I said, in 1978, we enacted the laws of Kenya Registration of Persons Act to make it compulsory for registration of everybody 18 years and above for purpose of the Huduma, so that it could have some legal mandate. We also had a miscellaneous amendment, and it was also instituted into the law. Again, we have come up with a new law, which is in Parliament, which is named sorry, but before I get there, I've said we have also the regulations to support the registration for Huduma. By the way, Huduma means in Kenya, Huduma means services, because the identity card in Kenya is more for services, and also again, of course, for identification and security. We had a lot of legal challenges that we were in a process of interfering with people's privacy. So in 2019, we were able to enact the Data Protection Act, and the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner is already in place. Again, like I've said, the Huduma bill is already in Parliament. The essence of this law is to integrate all the agencies, especially the National Registration Bureau and the CRIS, so that you can have one entity which will be handling registration of individuals from birth to death. And again, after that, in attendant to it, we have also developed the regulations. When I say we, it is an interministerial format. It's where it involves a lot of players who are really involved and affected by the services which the new card or the new registration is going to affect. Next slide. Okay, in terms of financing, let me start by pointing out that the identity card system in Kenya is fully government financed. And again, also the Huduma,
Ruben, I think we lost your connection. Janet, are you still with us, or has Kenya lost the connection?
I'm here. I'm with you.
Okay. Ruben, are you with us? No, we lost Ruben. Janet, can you back Ruben up to complete his presentation, then kick into your presentation? I'm worried we can't reach him.
Dr. Athik, Ruben is back. They're just sorting out his system right now, but Ruben is back.
Okay, we don't hear him.
Mr. Kamosa, please unmute.
Yes, I'm on the technical platform where I started by saying we have an AFIS-based database of capturing 10 fingerprints and also facial recognition. That's going to be work in progress. Right now, what has been validated is on the fingerprints. That's what we are using both in our registration task. But of course, for purpose of capturing, we also capturing facial recognition. Again, we have a centralized card production, like I said, for the current ID, and also for the Huduma, we also have a centralized database, production center, which will be used to process all sorts of other documents, including the proposed that we could also process the driving licenses from there, the passports from there, and all other documentation in one centralized and secure environment. I'd mentioned about our Huduma number, that it contains a unique person's identifier and a centralized database and a UNOMA card. The Huduma number card, that is the chip, will contain 2 fingerprints with best quality verification authentication, one from each either of the hand. At the net, you'll have several data. You'll also have data of various organizations, which right now are using the ID for purpose of identification. You'll have the KRA, that's our Revenue Authority PIN number. You'll have the NSSF number, you'll have the NHIF number, and various other organs which use, or agencies, which use the ID for purpose of identification. We are also piloting to you with our National Health Insurance Fund right now on how they can use our Huduma card for purpose of services. What I'm trying to say is that we already have an HIF card, but we are saying with the Huduma card, it will be more cost effective and practicable to use our current Huduma card to replace the National Health Insurance card which had been developed. Next slide. Yes, those are the data protection and privacy measures we have. We have the Protection Act. We have the Data Protection Act. And I think I had already gone through that, Tari.
Yes.
Next slide. Yes, challenges. One of the challenges when we were trying to register people for the Hudumas exercise is that there was apathy. A lot of people are very apprehensive about it. They thought it would interfere with their privacy. Others didn't think it would work. Kenyans have been used to the current identity card because in Kenya, like I said, there's nothing you can do without your identity card. And of course, humanly, a lot of people resist change. So we had new applicants who were not very keen. Yes, a lot of civil society and other organs have taken us to court on various issues in terms of the new Huduma card. And again, the use case is a major issue. As I said, we started by upgrading the current card to have a chip and also to capture the digital data. And now we are at a level where we can start saying, yes, we now wish to get to the next level where various organs, various individuals, and can
Mr. Kamota, are you with us? We seem to have lost Mr. Kamota again.
I think this is an important slide for our audience to take into account. Actually, we will make the slide available. Given the shakiness of this, can we finish this presentation, operator, and move to Janet? She seems to have a better connection, and then we can come back. Sorry about that. This is the problem with the connections often. Okay, so Janet, if you are ready, welcome. I hope you have a good connection. And
I hope I have a good connection. I'm ready.
Okay, operator, please launch.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. My name is Janet Musheru. I'm the head of Civil Registration Services, where we register births and deaths. Move on. And as I said, civil registration is a government agency in the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, which is mandated to register all births and deaths in Kenya, occurring in Kenya, and those of Kenyans occurring abroad. We operate under Cap 149, laws of Kenya. Let's move on. Now, this is a pictorial way of how we do registration. That is the registration process and how we transmit registers of birth and death. You can see the National Registry that is based in Nairobi. Then we have sub-county offices. The sub-county offices receive notification from assistant chiefs for those children and children who are born at home. And then the other agent of registration is medical personnel for events of births and deaths occurring in health facilities. And then whoever is not registered, if a child is not registered either in a hospital or at home, we capture them in what we call MCH strategy. When they are coming for immunization, we make sure that we register them that time. And that is how we've managed to ensure that our birth registration is high. Move on. That is just the vision of the department, is to be a comprehensive and reliable source of personal, legal records and vital statistics. And our mission is to promote and enhance the security of Kenya, creating a comprehensive population database, personal legal records, and generation of timely and reliable vital statistics through registration of births and deaths. Those are our mission and vision. The legal framework for the department, we are anchored under the Constitution of Kenya 2010, And then we have Births and Death Registration Act, Cap 149, which we have repealed, but it's not yet through, as Kemodo said. We are still operating under Cap 149. And then there are other statutes, such as Data Protection Act 2019, Huduma Number 2021, National Civil Registration and Identity Management 2021, and other small statutes. That is how we operate. And that is the status of birth registration in the country. As you can see, birth registration declined from 64.1% in 2016 to 20% to 60.9% in 2017. But since then, it has been on an upward trend from 73.4% in 2018 to 82.9% in 2020, which means we are doing very well in birth registration due to various interventions. The proportion of births registered in health facilities has increased from 95.6 in 2019 to 97.7 in 2020, due to also interventions by the government, availing universal health care to Kenyans, and awareness creation to mothers that they should have their children in health facilities. However, there is a general decline on birth registration from community. That means if the births increase in hospitals, they have reduced in the communities from 4.4% in 2019 to 2.3% in 2020, which for us is a positive thing, because we want all children to be born in hospitals. Move on. And then status of death registration in the country. Nationally, death registration has been on a downward trend from 41.9% in 2016 to 37% in 2020. We have been interrogating and asking ourselves why this is so, yet it's mandatory for one to get a burial permit before they bury their dead. The proportion of deaths registered in health facilities has also declined from 57.2% in 2019 to 53.6% in 2020. There is an increase in death registration in community from 42.8% in 2019 to 46.4%. What we did to interrogate and find out why this is happening, we teamed up with the WHO, CDC, and Vital Strategies to find out why death registration in hospitals is happening. And we have piloted in 6 counties. And what is coming up is that more deaths are happening in the communities as opposed to hospitals. And the dashboard is really showing us that, and we want to, and when more deaths occur in community, it means most of them go unregistered. Unless the chief there is very, very active. So what we are doing, we are creating a lot of awareness and building capacity of assistant chiefs so that they make sure that they report all deaths that happen in their areas of jurisdiction. Move on. Civil registration and vital statistics milestones. We digitized records. In our server right now, we have 46 million records, which means that is almost the entire population of the country. And that was in preparation of automation, because we realized automation is key for us to maintain proper registration of births and deaths. And then development and rollout of a web-based application, CRBS, in 8 counties. We realized that we cannot automate the entire country at a go. So what we did, we started with Nairobi and 7 other counties. Then we roll out to the rest of the country. Then to do that, we realized that we have to review our business process, because before we were registering using manual processes. So on an automated process, we needed to to review our business process, which we've done. And also we reviewed the tools, including the papers which people are filling. And then in Nairobi, when you are applying for a death or a badge, you have to do it on a digital platform. You apply through eCitizen, and we have come up with what we are calling a one-day service, because we don't want to tire the population. So they come in the morning, and in the evening, they go back with their either a birth certificate or a death certificate. Those are the milestones we have achieved in civil registration, and that has been made possible due to collaboration with our partners and also other government departments, Ministry of Health, because they are our agent of registration. We have also worked very closely with UNICEF so that we come up with, we build capacity of communities and show them the importance of registration. We also worked closely with the Ministry of Education, who created demand for us for a birth certificate, such that no child is allowed to join a school before they produce a birth certificate. That created demand for us. And we also realized that we have also to work with the communities. We have to build their capacity, and we have to also show them the importance of registering their births or their deaths when they occur. Move on. Civil registration integration and interoperability. So we also realized civil registration cannot work alone. So you can see a diagram there. You can, the purple one, the orange one, that is the database for civil registration. Between, you can see a civil registrar who gets their notification from either the applicant and assistant chief, registration assistant, who is either an assistant chief or a health facility. And then we feed onto Huduma number database. And then from the Huduma database, we are able to, the other agents of registration, the other departments of government who may require our data, tap from that Huduma number database, especially National Registration Bureau, because they have to register a child when they reach 18 years. Immigration, in case somebody requires a passport. NHIF, in case they need to verify a person's data or particulars. We work very closely with very many departments of government, and they have to tap information from the Huduma number database, which we feed from data from civil registration, being the primary data generators. And then you can see down there, the applicants who are not registered and the information need to be verified, we still go back to that Huduma number database. Move on. So, and for us to be integrated with the other departments, we need to, all of us need to be automated, and we need to work very, very closely. CRVS contribution to the implementation of the UN legal identity agenda in Kenya. We started with benchmarking with the best practice and technology registration. We went to Estonia and other countries to see how we need to do our registration for us to have 100% registration. Then there is rollout of the maternal and child health strategy. And that is the one I said that for those children who are not born in hospitals and those who are not also registered at home, we make sure we register them during immunization, because most mothers, majority of them will still take their children for immunization, even when they were not born in hospital. So that way we've been able to register very many children, especially even in Nairobi, we are almost over 100% registration, and we are making sure that even in other counties, there is the same case. Then we realized that the assistant chief who do registration, who are our agents of registration, we have done a lot of capacity building, because we realized most of them did not have the knowledge of how to do registration. There is also a very high turnover of the assistant chiefs. So we made sure that we build their capacity. Even in hospitals, we realized that the medical personnel, some of them view registration as if it's not their mandate. So we really have worked with them, built their capacity, and shown them the importance of registering vital events. And then we've also done a lot of awareness creation and advocacy of civil registration services. We come up with a Kenya Vital Statistics report every year, working very closely with the United Nations Population Fund. And that report is very useful and informative of the trends of the population in the country. We've also increased our registration offices because we realized the population is getting very tired, moving from one place to another. So what we've done, we are trying to increase the number of registration agents. And we want to have, it was passed in Parliament last year. It's not yet fully funded, but we are moving on and we are hoping that funding will be available so that we have, in every sub-county, we have a registration office. We also do a lot of monitoring and evaluation to see our weak areas. And we also make sure that for those people who are nomads, we follow them where they are. So we do mobile registration. And that is how we've managed to implement the UN RIA agenda. And we are hoping by 2030, we will have covered the coverage. You have reached 100%. Move on. And those are the strategies we employ to achieve universal registration of vital events by 2030 or earlier. We are hoping that that is digitization. We are doing digitization to ensure that all civil registration operations are done and executed on a fully automated platform. Right now, as I said earlier, it's only in Nairobi and some other 8 sub-counties. The rest of the country is manual, and you know, with the manual process is subject to abuse, subject to duplication, and that is what we are trying to avoid. We are scaling up the rollout of the maternal and child health strategy. This is the one I said where we capture, we register children when they go for immunization. So it's not in all sub-counties, so we are trying to roll it so that in every sub-county, every child who visits a health facility for immunization is registered. Then we are also strengthening strategic partnership and collaboration with stakeholders and development partners. We have a technical working group made up of government departments in charge of those who do registration in one way or another. We also have development partners who support us. And the technical working group backs and directs and the activities of the department. We see where there are gaps, we come up with solutions. And this also helps us not to have duplication or overlap of partners supporting the same activity. Then that is where I talked about mobile registration in hard to reach areas. Some of our areas are very fast and far. And so we do mobile registration in those communities, especially the nomads. We also go to refugee camps and ensure that their children are all registered. Then we do capacity building, not just for our officers, but also for community, because we realize you can't force them unless you let them know first why you need to register them. And monitoring, we've increased monitoring. And then we have also started using, like what I talked about, rapid mortality surveillance. We are using mobile phones for reporting. And we've seen it's really working because all the assistant chiefs are able to report in real time of a death if it happens. And we are able to see that on the dashboard. Move on. What we've learned from COVID pandemic is that legal identity remains crucial during emergencies and pandemics, because we realize, most people realize the importance of civil registration when this pandemic strike. everybody was asking us for data. And I think that is when we started working with CDC and WHO, because they realized they should have supported civil registration area so that we are able to report, to come up with real-time data on death. A complete CRVS system is an ideal component in a population for proper and accurate data reporting. I think there is a conference of ministers that was started to support CRVS in Africa. And I think that is an action towards the right direction, because most countries, their CRVS is neglected. And you only realize that when you have an emergency or a pandemic like COVID-19, because you don't know how many people died, you don't know where they died, you don't know the cause of death. And I think we have learned that during COVID-19.
Okay, Janet.
So we also need a resilient system. And that is what we are doing, to have a system that is, even during emergencies, is able to produce data and show the position of the country. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's wrap up, if you please.
Yeah, the challenges are just like what is bedeviling most of the countries: inadequate number of registration agents, practice of re-reporting, especially in death, such that the death certificate is not complete because a lay person may not know what caused the death. Then there's widespread apathy and lack of immediate tangible registration of births and death. Then there is geographical coverage challenges because the areas are vast. Move on. And then I summarize by showing our services. From when you are born, we register you, and in between you are managed, and then when you die again, we exit you through a death certificate. Thank you very much.
That's a very nice photo graphic. Thank you so much, both of you. Actually, there are some questions, but before we do that, I want to get clarification. The Huduma number is actually a Huduma card. You have to pay for it. Is that correct, or is it free?
For now, it's free.
Huduma card is free. Is
Yes.
Huduma card accessible to refugees? Because Janet, you said you register refugees. Ruben, do you register refugees?
Yes, I register refugees on behalf of the Commissioner for Refugees. I process identity cards for them. We are also processing refugee cards for them. And also alien cards.
They don't get Huduma number cards.
They'll get Huduma number cards.
Okay, so Huduma is really inclusive. It allows you. There was a question here that says, if yes, which you said yes, how did the government work with UNHCR, which already has a database of these individuals' identity? Were there any coordination between you and UNHCR in registering the refugees?
Okay, all the data from refugee camps, which is captured by UNHCR, is migrated to the National Registration Bureau. So I'm the custodian of that data. We work very closely with the UNHCR.
Okay, you work very closely with the UNHCR. Janet, your data is eye-opening about the trends in civil registration. I think people take it for granted. They think, you make progress, and yes, civil registration is on a path to reach 100%, but along the way, you see bumps in the road and things start coming down again. Civil registration is a very much an alive, dynamic thing that you have to keep feeding. How much do you think political will and support for civil registration impacts your ability to produce total coverage of civil registration? Do you think this is just inherent fluctuations due to population changes in attitude, or do you think there was a funding challenges or changes in government?
I think it's not because of the political will is there, although we also had to do a lot of awareness creation for our political class, because even them, they did not understand or appreciate the importance of civil registration. But what we did to make the figures go up or to increase coverage of civil registration services, we did what we call rapid resort initiative, where within a month we told everybody, every grown-up who is not registered to come and register, and registration that time was free. That we did in 2019. And that made our registration go high.
Oh, so there was a special event that made it go high,
Yes.
which was late registration. But I'm talking about new birth registration, the newly born registration. Do you see fluctuations in that over time?
Especially during COVID-19 when we started, because most people are fearing to go to a health facility to give birth there. And also the assistant chief, even when they register, those registers were not reaching us on time. So that is why there are, sometimes you can experience a fluctuation because of maybe a disaster or an emergency in a population. Right. And that is what we witnessed. But now it was declared an essential service and we cannot cruise down. We have to continue registering and it's compulsory.
Right, okay. Ruben, there's a question here for you, which basically says, you know, the Huduma number or Huduma card, Huduma identity is essentially a service identity. Therefore, it's supposed to support sectors that want to deliver services. Now, are these sectors able to verify the identity online, or are they just using the card for offline authentication of the identity? And therefore, possession is enough. You don't need to do an online verification of identity.
Yes, like I started by pointing out that's the second phase of that program. We are working closely now with all the organizations, all the agencies, so that they can be able to verify their data straight from the database. But as I said, right now we also we are only going for an upgrade because we have our e-government system where individuals are able to get into the system and apply for all services direct to other databases. So we already have those systems in place. We are only going for an upgrade.
May I add something?
Please, Janet, please.
I think that is why we are integrating as these departments. We integrate so that anybody who wants to verify, they will be able just to click a button and they will be able to see the information of that person.
It's open to the public, or is it open only to ones that pay or that sign an MOU with you?
I think it will be open to whoever want to whoever is authorized to verify.
Authorized. Okay.
If it's an NHIF, National Hospital Insurance Fund, if they want to verify, I think they will be given those rights to verify.
Okay, I understand. Now, let's talk a little bit about, I mean, we're running out of time. If anybody wants to join the community voices, we could accommodate, but otherwise, I have a burning question, which is basically, we've been witnessing what the development of Kenya's identity ecosystem, from civil register to Huduma, going through the second generation and all the innovations that you've been building together. You've been basically keen on creating total coverage. You've been keen to allowing service delivery based on your identity. You're keen to let elections be supported by, so all the right principles. Yet there's been a record number of legal cases that were brought. Either this is sort of a testament to how good the legal system is, which allows any citizen or any civil society to come and take a case, or there is a misconception about what you're trying to do. If I may ask your perspective on what led to so many cases, but also what lessons have we learned? Have we been able to build bridges to those who do not understand what you're trying to do? And do you think that those bridges are working?
Okay, maybe my point is, and I think it applies to identity systems in a lot of countries and over the world, where when you introduce an identity system in a lot of countries, you are about to go to litigation, especially because of private data protection issues. It was the same when we started our first generation ID card. It was also the same when the first ID card was issued in 1915. Actually, Africans protested against it, and there was a big brutal force by the British to make sure that everybody was registered. That's why in 1947, they decided to open it to all the races. So it has been, anytime you come up with a new program, you are about to get that suspicion. And by the way, Kenya is a little bit very open in terms of our legal system. You find a lot of people who are about to go to court on various issues. But somehow we have seen especially our political class has embraced it. Our commercial sector has embraced it. It's generally the civil society. And maybe let me point out one of the biggest fears was coming from our minority groups, who they were feeling they were going to be disenfranchised. And in terms of the legal identity, Kenya is making very big strides. Last year, but one, we were able to issue identity and citizenship to the Makonde, who are stateless, those community who had migrated from Mozambique, and all of them were able to issue with identity documentation. Later this year again, the Shona community who for the years, they've been here for more than 50 years, who have been resident in Kenya. Again, the government has been able to bequeath them with citizenship, and we issued them with documentation. We are having a problem of where some of our Kenyan citizens went to refugee camps for better provisions, because refugee camps, you have better health facilities, you have better education, and there was a free provision of food. So a lot of Kenyans went to the refugee camps, and their data was captured in our refugee database. And there has been a lot of clamor for us to remove them from the refugee database and issue them with citizen documentation. And we are in the process of issuing around 15,000 of them as we speak with that documentation. So in terms of real identity, Kenya is making very good strides. And I think it is some of these fears from some of these communities who will now approach the civil society for purpose of getting legal redress.
I understand. Janet and Ruben also, one of the strategies that I see Kenya has adopted has been really the reliance on local capacity and the development and enhancement of what you have, instead of going out and tendering something completely new and starting from zero. To what extent, Janet, has this been the case for the civil registration? How much of what you're doing is homegrown, and how much of it are basically imported platforms? And then Ruben, similar question for the national ID.
Whatever we do in civil registration, we realize that it has to be sustainable. And for it to be sustainable, we have to understand and know what we want. So whenever we are coming up with something, even when we are doing automation, it's being done within the country. And then if we get support, we bring people in and tell them exactly what we want, and then they support, but we don't allow them to decide for us or to read. Because what works in Kenya, what works in other countries may not work in this country. And we are very aware of that. We also realize the level of unemployment in our country. So all the things we do in this country, we do it in mind that we want to create employment for our youth. And like when we did digitization of a lot of million records, we employed youth. We told them to come with a computer, and we paid them, and we were paying them per day. And the government spent 600 million shillings, and that money came back to the country because it's the youth that got that money. And they were very satisfied, and we got very good feedback. So mostly what we are doing, even the use of mobile phones, we are saying we are also doing very well in mobile phone M-Pesa. And so we feel we should be able to use mobile phones to reach people for registration.
So it's basically, you're trying to leverage a lot of the local capacity and build even more in doing that. To what extent, Ruben, this has also been your strategy in your developments?
Let me point out that, like I pointed out, the current second generation country we introduced in 1995, it was supposed to have a life of 10 years, which means by 2005, we should have introduced a more updated electronic identity card. We went into tender, into procurement process. Then some of the participants went to court and it was stopped. Since then, it has been stopped 3 times. And the government has decided that we will never implement the electronic identity card because every time, like I said, our country is a little bit open in terms of litigation. So we decided that to use our own local capacity. We are using our own government officers to develop the software and also to come up with the systems. That's what we have been using all through the Huduma. Other than the identity card processing machines which we bought from outside, for purpose of the software, we have developed it internally using our own government officers.
Okay, just a couple of questions that came through. We will answer them and then we will end the session. Basically, one question is saying, can identity service providers approach the IPRS to help accelerate adoption of Huduma number ID verification by the private sector while the public sector engagement is ongoing? I guess they're asking for what would the role be for the private sector in the Huduma number rollout?
Okay, as I had alluded to the fact that Huduma database is going to be an upgraded IPRS. As of today, a lot of private and commercial organizations are already connected to the IPRS. A lot of banks, a lot of telcos like Safaricom, Airtel, and others are already connected to IPRS. And it's open to any other agency, private or government. Of course, with certain security safeguards, you cannot access all the data. But yes, Huduma is also going to be open to that. Actually, we are already talking with the financial sectors, banks and others, for purpose of them utilizing the Huduma system.
But would you use them as registrars? Would you have a vision to allow, like for example, Nigeria is creating a registrar system, they certify, and then they are able to bring to you identities. Would you consider that?
Yeah, now, for data protection, it's only the individual himself or with the express authority from the individual that you can be able to acquire data of a certain person in the database. So for purpose of privacy, that one we have safeguarded that way. It's only where for purpose of utilization identification, you can allow certain authorities, certain agencies. And because you must sign MOUs with them for purpose of protection of that data.
I understand. Okay, Janet, did you?
I want to add something and say that maybe we may not use them as registrars, but they are very important in helping us reach the population because we are using them to send SMSs, even to tell them their IDs are ready for them to come and correct. So they are very, very supportive. And then when we want even to verify whether person used the right information, we are able to use the mobile providers. They are very important in support of, even as we've used them a lot as civil registration.
Excellent. I think I'm forced to end the session here. I just want to say, you know, we've been together. This is our 20th episode, and it is sort of the identity authorities and the identity stakeholders all throughout Africa who have made these live casts a voice of Africa for identity matters. 20 episodes, most of them 2.5 hours to 3 hours every time. So we've been together in a long journey. I think the insights that have been coming out of these are invaluable. And I'd like to thank, of course, today's participants for their valuable views. I thank Kenya, I thank South Africa, I thank NORAD, I thank LIB for all the contributions that they've made, but also all of the dozens and dozens of participants. We may be over 120, 130 people who participated in these live casts. So we're going to continue with you, and we hope that you will continue to benefit and enjoy these forums of exchange, South-South exchange, and also teaching the world about some of the experiences, real experiences on the ground. So thank you very much. And with that, we end this 20th episode of Livecast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
was nice.
Mm.
That was nice.